guys already have some material on the format, so I believe it will now make my work a bit easier, as Mwangi Moses is projecting his screen. So for the sake of introductions, for those who are not who have not met before, I'm Hilary Matano, and I'll be taking you through this training. So now, based on the projection we are having, so British parliamentary format is amongst the very many debating structures or formats that you're having. We have the British parliamentary format, we have the World Schools format, then we also have the Canadian style format, but those are not going to be our focus today. We'll be looking at the British parliamentary format. And just as any debate is, we have the government bench and the opposing bench. The government bench can as well be referred to as the proposition, which is not included there, or the affirmative bench, because they are arguing for the motion. The opposition bench are arguing against the motion. So the debate is structured in this manner. We are having 4 teams. So this is the first team, the government side. Then this is the second team. For the opposition, this is the first. And then for the opposition, this is the second team. So all these teams are competing against each other. That is what you need to know from the beginning. Even though we are having 2 teams on the government side, or 2 teams on the opposition side, each of these teams are competing against each other. So I believe you can scroll down, Moses, so that we look further into the roles of what each of these team members does. Okay. So before we get to the speeches, okay. Yeah, so the Prime Minister, so the speeches, I'll take you back a bit. The speeches are in a zigzag manner. We have the Prime Minister speaking first on the government side, then the opposition leader speaks next, then we have the Deputy Prime Minister speaking, then the Deputy Opposition leader speaking, then we have the Member of Government, Member of Opposition, Government Whip, and ultimately the last speaker in this case is the Opposition Whip. So what roles do each of these members play? So the opening government, which comprises of the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, they set the case, or they set the course, or they set the ball rolling for the debate. They define the direction which the debate is going to take, depending on the motion that is given. Because one, the Prime Minister will define the motion. In defining the motion, he will set the case, the direction in which the debate wants to take. Say we're having a motion like, this house will vaccinate everybody. So the government or the Prime Minister will come and tell us, what does vaccinate mean in this case? Who is everybody? Or which government is this that you're talking about? So that is one of the roles that the Prime Minister, as the leader of the government, does. He defines the motion, that is defining the motion, and then he presents the case of the government. If the government is going to vaccinate everybody, why? You can present to us the status quo. What is the situation on the ground? That's just a sample motion. The status quo. Have people been vaccinated? No. Why are they vaccinating? What is the need? What necessitates everyone being vaccinated? Then when we come to the next speaker, who is the opposition leader, he will outline, if he or she does not agree with the definition of the motion that is given by the Prime Minister, he or she is at liberty to define it in a manner that suits them. Once they've given the definition, then present the case, rebuttal the points given by the Prime Minister, then present the case. Those roles, those two things can be done. Either can come first. So he rebuttals. Rebutting means refuting. You don't just refute. He says nobody has been vaccinated. If the prime minister said nobody has been vaccinated, you don't come and say we don't agree that nobody, everyone. You don't come and disagree by saying not everyone has been vaccinated. You talk about numbers. You refuse what has been said and replace. That is always the rule. Refuse and replace. He has said this, and this. That is not the case. Things are this way. That is the best way in which one can present a rebuttal. Good. So once the opposition leaders presented the case of the opposition, then we move to the next speaker, which is the Deputy Prime Minister. So the subsequent speakers after the Prime Minister will always have to rebuttal the previous speaker. The opposition leader rebuttals the Prime Minister. The Deputy Prime Minister rebuttals the opposition leader. The Deputy Opposition Leader rebuttals the Deputy Prime Minister. In that one until you get to the last speaker. So for the Deputy Prime Minister, being a member of a team with the Prime Minister, he has to support the case that the Prime Minister has presented. So supporting in this case can mean presenting further matter, adding flesh to the argument that is given by the Prime Minister. If the Prime Minister talks about we have vaccinated, the necessity for vaccination is because we want to control the pandemic, then how? You talk about the how. You have the public awareness, has it been done, and things of that kind. That is the Deputy Prime Minister. Rebuttaling the opposition leader, which I've talked about, then providing new arguments. And since this is the last speaker on, this is the opening half. Maybe I'll bring that back once I'm done with the roles. Once he's done, then the Deputy Opposition Leader comes in. The first thing, rebuttal the Deputy Prime Minister. If there's anything that the opposition did not agree with that the Prime Minister said, the Deputy Opposition Leader comes in and says, the Deputy Prime Minister said this and this and this. He is even in a position to rebuttal the Prime Minister. They said this, this, and this. We do not agree with it. Why? Because of this, and this. Because this is how the situation is. Apart from rebuttaling the Deputy Prime Minister, the Deputy Opposition Leader presents the case, further case for the opposition, and the final argument, because he's the last speaker on the first half of the opposition bench. Then the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Opposition Leader, and the Deputy Opposition Leader, these teams comprise the first half of this debate. That is why the opening government, opening opposition are members of the first half of the British parliamentary format debate. Then we come to the second half. The second half comprises of the member of government for the government side, the member of government for the government side, and the member of opposition and opposition whip for the opposition side. So what roles are they playing? The member of government, since each of these teams are in competition, the member of government's role is to come and present what we call an extension. An extension is sort of a new matter that you're bringing to the debate, which is tied to the debate, tied to the motion, or it can be you pick an issue which the first half of the government, that is the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, did not touch on, or they just mentioned, but did not give extensive details on it. So you pick that issue, then you expound it, present more matter on it, present statistics on it, explain it very well to the understanding of the judging bench. The same, and then another role that the member of government does is to rebuttal the opposition, the first half of the opposition, the arguments that they presented. The member of government is always majorly a rebuttal speaker. Then the opposition member of opposition performs the same role the member of government does, but on the opposition side, the extension and rebuttaling the first half of the government bench and the member of government. The last speaker's roles are very simple. They summarize the debate. They summarize the debate. The government whip Apart from rebattling the case that has been put forth by the speakers from the opposition side, he or she presents a summary of what the debate has been about. The summary can be, in simple terms, you present the themes. What were the overriding ideas in the debate? If it was on matters money, what did the government say on money? What did the opposition say on money? If it was on matters health, what did the government say on health? What did the opposition say on health? If it was on matters taxation, what did the government say on taxes? What did the opposition say on taxes? So I always recommend when you're presenting the clashes, when you're presenting the summary, you do the themes. Then under these themes, you present how divergent the views of the government and the opposition were. That is, in short, the clashes. So the final speaker does a rebuttal, then presents the summary, the summary of the debate, which is in the form of the themes, the overriding ideas within the debate, and also the clashes. The clashes are where there is a contentious issue that was not well, that had issue, that there was a contentious issue in the debate from both sides of the debate. That said, anybody who has a question before I proceed, or if I'm too fast? Any question? If there is none, I'd like to skip this bit of the point of information and look at the motion framing. Motion framing. Having looked at the roles, so the motions for debate, British parliamentary format are always structured in a particular manner. So the starting of the motion can be structured as THW. This translates to this House will. And then we have THBT. This House believes that. THS. This House shall, or this House supports. Then we also have THR. This House regrets. Okay. Yes. So those are among some of the motion framing. You look at a motion when it is presented and you see something like THR all in caps lock, then you wonder what that is. So THR will mean this House regrets a particular issue. THBT means this House believes that. THW, this House will undertake a particular action or whatever it is. Then THS, this House shall, or this House supports. So those are the framings of the motions. So if you see anything of that kind, don't be worried. Just know what it means and pick up from there. Having looked at the motion framing, I want us to look at the timing. But before we do that, the motions are always come up with to address a particular issue. So that you need to keep up in mind when you're preparing for any debate. When you're given the motion, look at it from what issue is it addressing. The motions are always structured to look at a particular issue that is happening in the society. If we are talking about this House believes that LGBTQ community, blah, 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 whatever framing it is. So we need not to be emotive when you look at a motion and it touches on us. Debate is all about argument. How convincing are you in the arguments that you're presenting? Convince the judges with the arguments. Don't bring in emotions because you feel like the motion pinches somewhere. Having looked at that, we look at timing. Timing. So each speaker has 7 minutes of speech. In the standard British parliamentary format, each speaker has 7 minutes of speech. 7 minutes. Has 7 minutes of speech, but in instances where time is a constraint, the organizers of an event always do 5 minutes. Always do 5 minutes. So this time is divided as follows. For 7 minutes, the first minute is protected. I'll talk about what that means. Then that is, so from the 2nd minute to the 6th minute, that is unprotected time. Then from the 6th to the 7th, that is protected time. What does it mean when we say that time is protected or unprotected? Anybody who is having an idea or who can try? Anyone? Fine, let us proceed. So protected time means that from the 1st minute to 1 minute and 59 seconds, or to the 2nd minute, the other members of the debating team are not allowed to interrupt you. If it is the Prime Minister who is speaking, the members of the opposition should solely do the listening from the 1st minute to the 2nd. But from the 2nd minute to the 6th, unprotected time means it is within this time that the other members of the opposing side are able to interrupt by asking you points of information. Point of information. It can be a clarification that the member needs from a point you've said, or it can be a question. So the point of information are always presented between the 2nd and the 6th minute if it is the standard 7-minute time. But if it is 5 minutes, so we'll have it between the 2nd and the 3rd minute. Yes, and the 2nd and the 3rd minute. Then after that, the last minute is always protected. So it is during that time that you are required to present a summary of your case, then close your present or your submissions. So the POIs are always advised to be as short as possible. Maximum time for asking a POI is always 15 seconds. That means if it is not well thought through, you'll be sluggish in presenting it. It is always advised that you write it down. Write it down, then when you're given the chance to ask it, you take the shortest time possible and ask the POI. Any question before I proceed? Good.
Maybe you can tell us, is there a particular way in which the POI should be structured, or it's just a basic question?
Okay, thank you for that question, Esther. So the purpose of a POI is not just to get a clarification or to get an answer from the person who is speaking. The purpose of the POI is to deconstruct the argument they're giving. If you are in the opposition and you're asking the government the person from the government who is speaking, the POI should be such that it presents a flow in the argument they're presenting. So you need to be very wise when you're structuring it. In as much as you're seeking the clarification from them or asking a question, you need to structure it in a way that it presents a flow in their argument. If they say that Prime Minister is speaking and saying, Mr. Chair, we have worked on the vaccination model and we've seen that by 15th of June, we shall have vaccinated 10 million people. Then you raise your hand. So before the POI, you ask the POI, you always raise your hand and call POI. So it is on the discretion of the person who is speaking to give you the chance to ask. If they don't give you the opportunity to ask, well and good. You sit down and continue listening, because it is always advised that as a speaker on the floor, take at most 2 POIs, because you also have the time. You also need to have the time to present your case. Your question well answered, Esther?
Yes, it is.
Good. So we've looked at the timing and the presentation of the POIs. Then let me look at another thing here that I've prepared for us today is the prep time. As you've seen in the document that Moses was sharing, you're having 4 teams. On the government side, we're having 2, that is opening government, opening opposition, closing opposition. In standard BP format, these teams prepare separately. These teams prepare separately. The opening government prepares on their own, the opening opposition prepares on their own, the closing opposition on their own, the closing government on their own. And the motions are always given 15 minutes. You are given, once the motion is read, you are given 15 minutes to prepare. 15 minutes to prepare. Within these 15 minutes, in standard BP rules, you're not allowed to use mobile phones or any other external material. So it is always advised you have all your write-ups. If you already received the theme for the debate, you have all the write-ups related to that debate, and go with them in the preparation. 15 minutes of preparation. So the motion is always announced by the chief adjudicator, who is always having other members in the judging bench. Then once it is announced, the teams have 15 minutes to prepare, after which the debate starts. Then a question may arise: how do you choose the side you debate on? Anybody who can try on that? How do you choose the side you debate on?
I was under the assumption that the adjudicators are the ones who will assign the motions to the groups to discuss and formulate ideas.
That is good. So generally in standard the BP format, the choice on the side on which you debate is always chosen. Like it's a raffle. Should I call it an abracadabra, something of that kind? So we have papers written number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So number 1 becomes the opening. So you send a representative to pick. So number 1, opening government. Number 2, opening opposition. Number 3 becomes the closing government. Then number 4 becomes the closing opposition. So it's not always automatic. Then as you're preparing for, as you're given, so the motion, after the motion has been read out to you, you go prepare after having picked the side from which you are debating. You actually pick the side from which you're debating, then the motion is read out, you go and prepare, then come and start debating. Good. Another thing, just for the start, so another thing you also need to note is that as the teams are preparing, they are not allowed to consult from each other. The opening government cannot consult the closing government in the preparation. Neither should or can the opening opposition consult the members of the closing opposition. You need to prepare independently. That is it. Then in the prep time, as the government or the prime minister or whichever side you are on, always think like the other person, think like the opposition. If the government is preparing their point, you can have a point, then what will the opposition say on this? So that you are prepared for any, you're closing in the loops for any rebuttals that may come from the opposition side. Are we clear? You preempt the arguments that they may present as you're giving your point. Because there's this time we are doing a debate on, it was on matters economy. We are at Pioneer University, and we were part of the closing. I was with my partner in the closing government, and as we were preparing, in as much as we had preempted everything, the members of the opening government came and said all our points. So we were between a rock and a hard place as we were thinking through and listening, preparing now fresh points. And funny enough, I don't know what we did, but we did not emerge losers. We were number 2 actually. So, and then also debate is about thinking on your feet. When you're preparing a rebuttal, as you are listening, think. As you are listening, think, so that you can easily find a flow in the argument that that person is going to be in the argument that the individual is presenting. I'm not privy to the theme that your debate will be on, but you need to read. A debater is a person who reads wide. You need to have information on at least everything. I know that is impossible, but read even beyond the scope of what you're studying. If you're in economics, read beyond economics, read something health, read something physical exercise, PE, so that when you're told, when you blink, it is an exercise, you don't just agree. Huh? Yes. Any question? Anything else? Okay, for me, I'd purpose to take the little time possible, say 30 minutes, to present us with the basics, just as I've done. If there's anything that you feel I've left out, which according to you is basic, you can reach out. Otherwise, I encourage us to get this file that Moses is having, to read through it, read through and understand. If there's any question, if there's any bit you feel you don't understand very well, you can reach out. Always reachable. So in the chat box, having a question, does this mean that there should be teams of 2 or people are matched randomly? So since you're already aware that each team comprises of 2 people, you can pair yourselves actually. Since you will be teams from your end, we'll have, say, around 5 pairs. Yes, 5 pairs. So each one of you, because you don't know where you'll be debating. Then I believe with constant practice, I'll get to you in a minute. With constant practice on debating, you'll know where best you can debate. Because for me, for the most of the time I debated, I was always in the closing up, and I performed very well as the whip, whether the government or the opposition. Another individual will be very best speaking as the first speaker, as the prime minister, defining the motion, presenting the case of the government, then you sit down. Another speaker may perform best as the opposition leader, deconstructing the case that has been put forth by the prime minister, then advancing the position of the opposition. So you need to, with constant practice debating, you'll be able to know where you debate best, on which position you debate best. Then how is adjudication done? Very good question. So once the motion is presented, number 1, presentation. Let me not even talk about presentation. Role fulfillment. Role fulfillment. You need to understand your role, because you cannot come in as the prime minister and perform the roles of the whip. You cannot come in as the whip and perform the roles of the prime minister. You cannot come in as the member of government and perform the roles of the deputy prime minister. So role fulfillment is one of those things that is always taken into account when doing the adjudication. Then 2, how did you present your case? Case presentation. Because it is always advised, I believe I've seen it, yes, just there, Moses. What is the idea that you're presenting? How do you analyze it? What evidence do you have to back the analysis that you've given? Because it will be very easy for the adjudicator to follow through. We are advancing this argument that this house supports, like for a motion here, we are having the death penalty. This house believes that the death penalty deters criminals. Good. On what grounds are you presenting that argument? Because 1, death is imminent and inevitable. So when one knows that he will die, he will not take part in any crime activity. That is the idea you're having. How do you analyze it? Present a case study of people who were facing the death penalty, or who had faced the death penalty and the penalty was revised and they changed. And then apart from that, so I've talked about role fulfillment, then case presentation. Then the others are just the usual public speaking issues, like voice, intonation, how well do you present? Sorry, how well do you present your point? Can you be able to number your ideas? How well can you how well can you say use voice? Is it called intonation? Yes, intonation to present your case. How well do you? How audible are you? Because for the adjudicator to be able to write or to, because the adjudicator is always writing. The adjudicator is independent. He does not know what you're going to say. So don't assume they know. The adjudicator is a person who does not know anything. So you're going there to inform them, to teach them. So when you're presenting your case, make sure it is in a manner that is easier for the adjudicator to identify. He or she presented this point. This is how the analysis was done. Then this is the evidence to back it. Because once you have evidence to back your idea, it will be very hard to be refuted unless the evidence is unfounded or baseless. Believe that answers your question, Esther. Anything else?
Do points of information add to someone's marks in quotes?
To some extent it does, because if you ask a very strong POI that deconstruct the case that has been presented on the floor, it adds value to your argument, to the case that you are presented or are presenting. If you ask a very shallow POI, it sort of negates the value that you would have gotten. Any other question? I see we've been joined by Keffa. Keffa, how are you?
Yeah, niko poa.
Welcome. Good. Any other question from any of us?
Hilary, maybe to wrap it up, you can tell us tips that worked for you when you were debating.
Prepare. Let me say, in simple terms, you have to prepare. Just as I said, a debater is somebody who reads, because when you're speaking, when you're the second speaker and the first speaker has poured all the points, and you feel, wow, what am I going to say? You need to be, first of all, read wide. A debater should read wide, actually. That is very, very important. Then think on your feet, because as you be listening, you need to ask a POI. You don't just listen to absorb all of it, then you ask a POI later, because the time frame you're having to ask a POI is between the second and the 6th minute, if it is the standard 7 minutes time, or the second and the 4th minute, if it is 5 minutes due to time constraint. So you need to listen, having prepared, then look at the case your team will be advancing and present and ask the POI. So read wide, think on your feet. Another thing is just apply the basic public speaking skills. Make sure you're audible. The judges can get your point. Arrange your points very well. We are going to talk about this. Then that brings me to another point. Since, especially on the first half of the government, since you're speaking, you're a team. The Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the opposition leader, and the deputy opposition leader. There is what we call delegation. You're preparing 2 of you. So maybe, let me say you're having like 6 points. The Prime Minister, especially on the government side, so the Prime Minister comes, sets the motion, sets the ball rolling, defines the points, defines the motion. We are going to be arguing based on 1, 2, 3 issues. We have these points. We say we have 6 points. I'll talk about taxation. I'll talk about the economy. We'll talk about health. We'll talk about the social aspect of it. We'll talk about the environmental aspect of it. Then you say, I will tackle the first 2, and my deputy will come and tackle the other 3 points. You see, in that sense, you prepare your deputy for whatever he's going to say. Unlike when you're having to say everything, then your deputy comes without anything to say. So there's that importance of delegation. You make sure you share the points. Since you're preparing together, have the points, then delegate. The first speaker will talk about 1, 2, 3, then he will invite me to speak on this as I build on whatever he has already said. Thank you. Maybe before we wrap up, I invite Keffa to say one or two things, because we've debated with him for some time, and maybe he's joined late. I may not have been able to follow what you've said, but I believe his sentiments maybe are important as well. Keffa, a word or two.
Yes, ninakupata. Just kiasi nilibaki nimepungukiwa na time hapa. Yeah, so I think it is all about preparation, the way Sir Matano amesema. Yeah, preparation is key. Then, especially for government. Hey, government, personally, I believe government often do have a greater responsibility. Yeah, a greater responsibility in terms of setting the pace as well as other things. Then to this, the closing halves. Hey, there is this aspect of extension. Yeah, oftentimes we find ourselves squeezed up. We do not know what to table as an extension, but that's something we can always work on. Yeah, otherwise it is more about being prepared adequately.
You?
Because this being a British parliamentary system, yeah, case study.
It looks like we've lost Keffa for some time. I think in case anyone has a question, we can ask at this point as we wait for him to rejoin, because I have a feeling he'll be back in a while. Okay, Matano has left too. So what we'll do is we'll share the tips. We already have the documents that are in the group. Okay, Matano is back. So if you have any question, you can ask at this point. Then maybe Keffa is going to rejoin and say what he was saying. Actually, he's back. Keffa, we lost you. So if you can hear me, please.
Sorry for that. There was someone with whom we scheduled a call at 5:47, so he made it and disconnected everything. Yeah, so it is all about preparation and having the facts right. You know, if you have your facts, you can manipulate them to whichever angle that you wish to take. But again, with Strathmore, there is this element of coming up with topics at random. Most of those things you might never have heard of before, but it is something manageable. Yeah, it is something manageable because there is always some time to prepare, to get ready for it. So I believe this is something you're gonna ace. Yeah, personally, I might be there as a swing. Do I just love swinging the balance, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Keffa. And just as we wrap up, I'm not privy to the theme of the debates you're going to be having. Whatever field it is, just need to have some information. Read wide as a debater, and expect anything. Expect any motion. There was this time we were debating on Semenya, and there were some debaters who did not even know who Semenya was, or referring to Semenya as a thing. What is Semenya? So you need to read wide, have information, and I believe everything will be good. Constant practice. Believe practice makes perfect. That is my closing remark. Thank you, Esther, for this platform. Looking forward to more of such as we prepare ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hilary and Keffa. And for your continued support, and even for making time and being with us and even taking us through the British parliamentary debate format. And with that, since there is nothing else for this meeting, I'd like to bring the meeting to an end and wish all of you a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.